success to me, there was interesting because I think that everyone, no matter if you're an entrepreneur or not, like I think that a lot of people don't, and this includes myself, I spent a lot of time not defining success for myself. So when you don't sit down and write down what success looks like, you have no idea when you've gotten there. And this even comes down to like last night, I wrote down what a successful Sunday would look like for me. Right. And I missed some of the things and I got some of the other things, but I had a frame of reference of like what my successful day would look like. And so, you know, for us, the interesting thing was like, I wanted to aggregate a community of lacrosse players. I wanted the second thing that was very specific was I wanted Nike to eventually advertise on our network. It was incredibly specific. It was like, that to me was success. If I made an online network, that Nike would advertise on, that would mean that I had made something.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to It's the Bearded Man Podcast with your favorite, the world's favorite bearded man, Bobbbaaaay. Each week with our guest episodes, I try to put the spotlight on someone who, in my eyes, has given themselves permission to live a life authentic to them. Our guest today is from Los Angeles, California. He's previously was the co-founder and president of the Lacrosse Network, a premier digital mobile network for the sport of lacrosse. He's now the co-founder and president of Colin and Samir, a production company that creates content about creators for creators. He's also the co-host of the Colin and Samir Podcast, with new podcasts live every Monday, 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And lastly, he's the co-founder of Press Publish, a clothing brand empowering creators to put their ideas out into the world. Today on the podcast, fellow bearded brother, Samir Chaudry.
Wow, man.
We're here, baby.
Yeah, I love being on a beard podcast. This is all about beards, right? Is that what we're talking about?
I when I started this podcast, I was like, am I going to go all in on just like a bearded man podcast and just have guests that only have beards? But I definitely have to potentially, maybe someday down the line, readjust the branding.
This is the premier destination for bearded men. And I love that. That's what I've always wanted to be on. So,
all right. Well, yeah, we made it. We're making it happen today, man.
I mean, our logo has me with a beard, so I'm locked into a beard for the rest of my life. And as are you now, being the host of the Bearded Man Podcast.
Yes.
So.
Are you happy to be locked in like a lifetime contract?
Happy to be. I haven't shaved this beard off my face since 2014. So I'm
right up there with you.
Yeah. I'm not shaving. Yeah.
What does the wife think about it? Is she cool? She's cool with it?
You know, when we started dating, I had a beard, so I don't know if I should shave it off.
She doesn't know you without it.
She doesn't know. I mean, she does know me without it. We've known each other for like 12 years, but she doesn't know this. Like, I don't know. The married man version, the dating, my wife version has always been with a beard. So, yeah.
Maybe the beard was the signed, seal, delivered asset that she's like, I'm all in on this guy.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, probably.
Man, Samir, this is I think a podcast long in the making. I've been watching you and Colin from afar for quite some time. A lot of mutual friends. I actually drove a couple of years ago when I was driving Uber full time in LA. I actually picked up Colin in downtown LA. It was like 20.
That was you?
That was me. I was his Uber driver.
Okay, so I know this story really well, but I didn't know that was you. I had no idea. Yeah, I remember Colin called me. He was like, "Dude, I just got picked up by an Uber." It was an Uber pool, right?
I don't even remember, but I was his Uber driver.
Yeah. He told me. I know that story. That's crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah. So it's that was many moons. I mean, that was sometime in 2018. But all that to say, I've been watching you guys from far, and it's high level content, and there's so much that we're gonna dive into today. I think one moment that clearly stands out to me with your story is even by the time you went to University of Santa Cruz, you went in there with intention to study film and digital media. So going into school, it seems to me you already had a sense of direction and feel for what you wanted to do. Was there a moment in your life when it kind of clicked and you realized this is something you kind of wanted to do?
You know, what's funny is actually I went in as an economics major.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. But I grew up being a storyteller. Like I was not a good student. I was not good at school. I didn't fully it just didn't click with me. There were certain classes I excelled in, and typically that was like, we had film classes at my high school and I did well in those. We had music classes. I did well in those. I was really into arts, storytelling, acting. I don't think
that was part of your you could take
that's part of my high school.
In high school?
Yeah. I mean, you have to remember, I went to high school in LA. So like, yeah.
Oh my God, that's such a different world.
Yeah, it's a different world. I mean, I wish I did more of it actually. When I got to high school, being the son of first generation immigrants, it's like you're trying to assimilate and find your identity, especially in high school. Everyone else is like parents, went to school in America and have like a frame of reference of what you're going through, but my parents did not. So I'm trying to figure out exactly who I am in high school. And, I was very into the arts when I was growing up, but when I hit high school, I started playing sports, and I loved to play sports. That's how I found community. But I do wish I actually did more. Like it's a regret I have. I wish I did more acting and more performance in high school. But when I went to college, I was an econ major just because, I don't know. That's what people do. Yeah. My dad's an entrepreneur, and it was like, that's what you do. You do econ. But as a frame of reference of my relationship to school, my first day of school at UC Santa Cruz was my first day on campus there. I'd never been there before until the day I went. I just didn't have like a relationship with school. It was just like a thing that everyone was doing. So I was like, yeah, I guess I got to go to school too. So I studied econ, and my freshman year, in order to like progress in the economics major, you had to like take this math exam, and I really didn't want to take it. And at the same time, I was taking film classes. And I remember very vividly, there was a moment where I was in economics class in the morning, and I think it was macroeconomics. And I was just like thinking, I was like, all this stuff is just made up. Like someone just made this stuff up to organize, what we're doing, to organize society and to organize how, like, it's very cool that it's all like created and it's like this amazing game that has been created. But then I went to film class and I cried when I watched a film. And I remember coming home and being like, okay, so I went to econ in the morning. I was interested in that, but it seems to me that someone kind of made this up. And then I went to film and I cried. And that emotion is like intangible. It's undescribable. Like, I don't know how to explain to someone. I can't put like proper terms around my emotions that I was feeling, but what an amazing thing that this piece of art could make me feel something. Yeah. And that night, I remember calling my parents and just saying, I'm not going to be an econ major. I'm going to be a film major, because I want to do that to others. I want to evoke emotion. I want to make people feel. I want to communicate ideas, through stories. And I realized like that's how you can make real change in someone, is when you can make someone feel something.
How did your parents feel about you wanting to make a change like that? Were they supportive?
My parents are pretty. My parents are pretty open and pretty progressive. And for them, my mom, I think, definitely was like, you should probably still do econ and maybe you could minor in film. But I really didn't want to take that math test. Granted, it was probably like a really simple thing to do, but I just didn't want to do it. And I was like, I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna major in film, and that's it. Like, that's it. I did do like, a lot of economics classes along the way. I took accounting. I was super into accounting. I don't know why. But I did a bunch of stuff along the way, but I primarily focused on film. So yeah,
it's probably good having, you said you did good in accounting. It's probably good to have some strength of numbers, especially when you're in the YouTube world of like analytics are your best friend. Like that's going to tell you what is working, what isn't working. So it's almost like at least you had some interest in that aspect. What's
interesting is like when you're growing up, especially in school, like I didn't want to do homework, right? Like I wasn't interested in homework, but I would stay up all night learning how to use GarageBand. I remember when I first got a Mac, and I was like, whoa, GarageBand is crazy. I would pull in these sounds and like try and make something. And I could stay up all night doing that. I could focus on that, but I had a really hard time focusing on anything else. And I learned how to edit video when I was really young, because we had a computer that had Windows Movie Maker on it. And I remember like, filming clips with my brother and then bringing it in there and being like, I can't believe we can just make something. Like, that's crazy. And even before that, my parents had a camera that had that you loaded a VHS tape into.
Oh, gee.
And you could like press buttons like fade to black. You could press slow motion. You could do all these like interesting in-camera edits. And my brother and I would just make stuff and then we just put it in the VCR and watch it back. And the audience for that was just me and my brother. Like we were making stuff and stories and little films that we would just watch back ourselves, and it would entertain us and excite us. And I never, since I was a kid, I always had that feeling of just true wonderment around being able to capture and tell a story.
That's the beauty of being a kid. And I try to even to remind myself to try to tap into that inner child, is that inner curiosity when you're not worried about what is society going to think, or you're just literally following that inner passion or inner interest of like creating videos for the heck of it. Nobody else is watching. It doesn't even matter. We're just doing this for fun. But then it leads to everything that you're doing today, just at a very higher level. As somebody that, from what I see, phenomenal storyteller, what have you learned is the key to telling stories?
The key to telling stories is having an incredibly deep understanding and empathy for your audience. That's really it. It's audience first. Like you have to understand who you're telling a story to. And then, from there, of course, you could start to dive into, hey, I'm going to tell it in a 3-act structure. I need a hook, but everything about what you're telling a story about has to do with your audience. Like, why did that film make me cry? It's because there was something that it tapped into me as an audience member, right? There's someone else who could sit next to me and be like, that was a terrible film. So audience first is everything. That's how we look at everything we do. The thing that's amazing about the age we live in today is the most niche audience you could think of exists, and you can access them online now. So audience first is the number one thing in storytelling. Like a lot of people think about what they want to make first, they make it, and then they try and find an audience. But I actually think it's the opposite.
So you want to totally understand the types of people you're creating for, to then know how to tell that story. That
also could be you, right? Like you could be like, I'm making this for me. I'm the audience for this. But then your expectation has to also be set that like you're just making that piece for you. So yeah, that's what I would say is like an unbelievably deep understanding of the audience, and what your intended outcome is with your story. So a lot of times when Colin and I sit down to craft something, we'll start with a sheet of paper or a whiteboard here in our office, and we'll write down identities on one side and emotions on the other side. So we'll say like, who is this for? And we'll write down different identity groups, and we'll get really specific with that. Wow. And then on the other side, we'll write down emotions. What emotion do we want them to feel? So you could go like 20-year-olds who live like post-collegiate 21-year-old who lives in Venice Beach. I want them to feel inspired. Right. And so then that line between the identity and the emotion, that's the story you're telling. Right. Because it's meant to create an emotion out of an identity. So that's what storytelling is.
Wow. Yeah. That's pretty specific to even think of it in that context where you're literally like whiteboarding and visually seeing it so that you can then connect the dots and understanding how do we actually do this and execute this. What, back in 2012, I think, is really when you first started putting yourself in front of the camera. This is with the Lacrosse Network.
Yeah.
And I had seen and heard in the piece that you guys had created called The Story of Colin Samir. I think it came out 2 years ago. But the line that caught my attention was you talk about we just kept uploading, which I think is so important, is that consistency aspect when you're just getting started with something. How did you hold yourself accountable in those early days to always show up regardless of the results? Even maybe today, are there certain things that you've trained yourself or you've held yourself to make sure you're actually doing the work?
Yeah, I think I have a really interesting relationship with failure. And I'm also a stubborn optimist. So I would say like on failure, I have a very hard time acknowledging anything as failure. And since I was a kid, when I was a kid, I used to skateboard. And I remember, like, if you've ever skateboarded and you tried to do a trick, the first time you try and do that trick, it is like an explosion of a board, right? The board flies in the air, it hits you in the shin. Yeah. It's like the worst possible thing that could happen. Yeah. But once you try once, you're like, oh, okay, well, maybe I'll make this adjustment. And it could take you a year, right? It could take you a year to try and do that trick. And oftentimes it did. But then you'd eventually get it, but you would never get there unless you started, right? And sometimes I remember I would trying to do a kickflip, right? For a long time, tried to do a kickflip. And then at some point in the middle of doing a kickflip, I spun the board in a different way. That was a 360 flip. And I was like, whoa, that's crazy. So if I had never gone on the journey of trying to do a kickflip, I would have never figured out how to do a 360 flip. And through that process, you start to realize your relationship with like, I'm not positive, Bobby. I'm not positive I've ever landed a kickflip. I'm
Not yet.
I'm not yet. I'm 32 years old. And I'll tell you this, I tried last week. So like, I just have an interesting relationship with trying things, right? Where it's, and I think you have to. So back to 2012, I was also at the same time, both with trying things and my relationship with being okay with things taking a long period of time. I was also unbelievably amazed at the fact that you could reach 100 people online. Like I was amazed. Every time I would upload, I would close my eyes and imagine 100 people in a room. And to go even a step further and talk about what we just talked about, audience first, the reality was the reason I started making lacrosse content is because I grew up playing lacrosse, and the only thing that existed in lacrosse was a magazine. And I felt misunderstood as a lacrosse player. I felt like the identity of a lacrosse player wasn't exactly what I wanted it to be. I felt like no one knew about what the sport I was playing in Los Angeles. And I felt like it was really hard to connect with other lacrosse players around the US. And so I wanted something to exist. I wanted a online media destination for the sport of lacrosse. Because when I was 13, 14 years old, that's what I wanted. I wanted to be able to watch lacrosse. I wanted to learn about lacrosse players. I wanted to understand what a professional lacrosse player looked like. I wanted to understand the stories in lacrosse. And so that's what I made. And, what that looked like was a 6-foot folding table in my childhood bedroom, a computer and a camera. And that was it. And it was just like, hey, let's go tell some stories. Let's find people who are playing lacrosse and let's tell stories about them. But I could look through a lens of understanding the audience because I was a member of that audience.
Yeah.
I was the person who wanted it. And so when I was filming, I remember one of the best things that ever happened was in the beginning, my brother watched one of the videos and he was like, what was that? Like, that is not interesting. And I was like, that's exactly right. It's not interesting to you. You didn't play this sport. This means nothing to you. Which is good. That's what I want. I want this to be only understood by my intended audience. And I think that's when you pair two things together with this excitement of, wow, I can reach 100 people. Like that's crazy. There's 100 and eventually 300 people watching our videos. Like I remember I lived at home and my brother did as well at the time. And I remember when one of our videos got 300 views and running into his room being like, dude, 300 people watched this video.
Yeah.
And we were both like amazed. Like, that is so crazy.
Yeah.
300 people. And there was comments there and people were talking to each other in the comments. And it was like, you could see the beginnings of a community form, a community that I was a part of too, that I wanted to engage with. And so, in terms of like the subsequent 3 years and 2 years of trying to make this a real thing, that has a lot to do with a relationship to failure. And by no means am I saying that it was easy. It was incredibly hard to try and make this into a business and into something that was real.
Yeah. I think that the key is what I'm hearing is just you completely took away that aspect of like failing and not allowing that to hold you back from actually pursuing and trying and attempting, because you're not going to be great when you first start. And even if it's 100 people watching or 150 or 200, it's something and it's starting. And then I think that you're almost like the fact that you're like closing your eyes and you're imagining what that feels like to have 100 people in a room. I think that is so powerful because it's so easy to just 100 views when other people are getting tens of thousands. And you're like, okay, I should just stop now while I'm ahead.
Yeah. And I think, again, like it's having like developing a relationship as an entrepreneur with success and failure and understanding your relationship of what's a success and what's a failure. Like the only failure to me would be if I didn't see it through. If I ever got to a point where I was like, I didn't take this as far as I possibly could have taken it. That to me would have been like, all right, I failed. Trying a bunch of different things was not failing to me. Trying a video and it not working was like, okay, cool. I just learned what doesn't work. So, right. So like, that's like beneficial to me. Success to me, there was interesting because I think that everyone, no matter if you're an entrepreneur or not, like I think that a lot of people don't, and this includes myself. I spent a lot of time not defining success for myself. So when you don't sit down and write down what success looks like, you have no idea when you've gotten there. And this even comes down to like last night, I wrote down what a successful Sunday would look like for me. Right. And I missed some of the things and I got some of the other things, but I had a frame of reference of like what my successful day would look like. And so, you know, for us, the interesting thing was like, I wanted to aggregate a community of lacrosse players. I wanted the second thing that was very specific was I wanted Nike to eventually advertise on our network. It was incredibly specific. It was like, that to me was success. If I made an online network that Nike would advertise on, that would mean that I had made something that, you know, the top sports brand deemed valuable. And that was something I communicated to everyone who worked with the Lacrosse Network, something that I wrote down almost every day, something that I talked about constantly. And that was like my guiding light. And so when I would upload a piece of content to the channel, I would think in my head, is this something Nike would put their name on? And that was something that was important to me. So it's interesting, you know, whenever we get to that part of the story, that did come to fruition. But it was something that I think is one of the most important lessons I've ever learned is like define what success looks like and define what failure looks like.
Yeah, that's crazy. I don't even think the defining of what success, like what you feel success is today is going to change what you feel success might be a year from now or 2 years from now. So do you feel like it's constantly changing for you?
Yeah, it could change every day. That's okay.
Yeah.
But like, I think there's certain things that change according to like whatever projects I'm working on, but other things that don't. And constantly doing the work to evaluate that and putting yourself in a position to have a conversation with yourself, I think is really important. And those are like it doesn't have to be in some, you know, like committing to meditation or committing to something different. It could be just a place where you find peace. Like for me, I swim to work out. And when I swim, like I'm underwater, I don't have any inputs. I'm only alone with my thoughts, right? Like you're underwater, you can't hear anything.
Yeah, you're completely disconnected.
And you're in this flow state going back and forth and back and forth. And that to me, like I always like 15 minutes into swimming is when like I can have clarity of thought.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden, like I'm like, I can't.
Endorphins are flying. Yeah.
I can't grab my phone. I'm not listening to a podcast. I'm not listening to music. It's just my thoughts.
Yeah. You got me beat because running is
that's great.
That equivalent.
Yeah.
I do listen to music, so I think most time it's like Lane 8 or like Rufus, so it's
sure
not so lyrical, but once I get flowing, it's that time and space that allows me to think through thoughts and like just like it's almost stillness within, even though I'm actually active, if that makes any sense. Like there's nobody, I'm not looking at my phone, I'm not checking emails, I'm not checking Instagram,
right?
I'm just solely in my head, and it is giving me so much value because it's allowing me to think through thoughts and like realize like when it's just me and in my head, what are the top things that come to my mind? And then I know when I get back home, it's like, this is what I need to focus on. This is what I need to work on, or just being self-aware of where my feelings are and understanding like, all right, if that's coming to mind when there's nobody around, maybe we should work on that and try to find ways to develop it better almost.
Yeah. And I think the last thing I'll say is something that I'm recognizing now is like, you know, we were working on a deal recently, and I was sitting with Colin and we were looking at like the amount of money that would come in and, you know, both of us were like, I don't think that's enough. And then we just got into a conversation of like, so what is enough money? And
that's a tough question.
And I was like, well, that's a really interesting question. We should probably be able to answer that question, because if you don't know what enough is, how do you know when you've gotten there? If any of your goals are connected to money, if your goal is like as much money as I can possibly make, it's like a lifelong endeavor of just, you know, trying to reach this thing. But what if you did take an hour to just write down, this is my dream house. This is where I would love to live. I like to get coffee every day. So I need at least 5, or if you're in LA, $7 a day to get coffee. I like to eat at these types of restaurants. I like to stay at these types of hotels. Let me just do a little math equation and see, like, to live a really happy life right now, like what I consider an unhindered life, how much money would that be? I feel like you don't really sit down and do that calculation a lot, but you spend your days trying to acquire as much money as possible. So it's an interesting thought.
You could be closer to it than you actually think.
You could be a lot closer than you think. Yeah. And even just knowing that number helps you evaluate like what, certain decisions you make. So yeah.
I mean, it's the conversation around minimalism. It's like, what is enough? How much is enough? Whether it's money, things.
You could, like, enough for you could be $12 million. I don't know, but like you just.
I'll take $1 million first.
Sure, yeah, but just spending the time to think about it, I think, is an interesting practice.
Yeah. When you were talking about how last night you were kind of writing out how a perfect study would look like, this was something you had talked about on the Ground Up show with Matt Diavella back in 2018, and you guys talked about how, at least you talked about how when you're looking at a week, you're thinking about what are the things I need to get done, and then you would break down by day, essentially. How am I actually going to execute on getting all these things done? How have you learned to kind of just focus on these small daily wins versus getting overwhelmed by big picture? Because that's really the key. If you can break it down to the micro steps, you're eventually going to get to these big time destinations.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, anything you do is like a bunch of little steps. And I think it can be really overwhelming when you look at other people who you consider successful and you're sitting down to do something and you're like, dude, this is so small. What am I doing? Like, why am I doing this? This doesn't make any sense. And I felt that a lot in my 20s. I remember feeling a lot in my head, like, God, I want to make $1 million. I want to make $1 million. I want to make $1 million. Right. I feel like every entrepreneur thinks that, like, $1 million is such a big deal. Right. Yeah. 1 mil is such a big, barrier to crack. So I remember one day I was so frustrated and I was constantly trying to do like big projects. And then I took a step back and I was like, wait a second. Even if I were to, like, if I am to make $1 million, I should probably make $10,000 first, right? Like, you have to learn how to do that first. Because even if I made 100,000, then that would mean that someone would have paid me, $10,000. I don't know. This is how my mind works. So
I love it. I
had to like break it, like move backwards and be like, well, have I ever convinced anyone to pay me $1,000? Or have I ever created something of value enough that's $100,000 of value? Let me back into this. And, that's like, there's a lot of learning in doing that, of being like, what is valuable, to someone. Again, I think that it comes down to both storytelling, selling, whatever you're doing. It's like audience first, understanding like, who are you valuable to? Who are you worth $1 million to? What industry are you worth $1 million? What is the skill set that is of that value? And going backwards to saying, okay, first let me start and prove myself at $1,000. It's just like if you were doing anything else, like you would do the same thing. If you're playing sports, you're going to start in Pee Wee and you're going to grow up and, and I think the second thing is, both as an entrepreneur as well as a business, I oftentimes look at my businesses, the same way you would look at a child, right? So like, your expectations of a 1-year-old business are going to be very different than your expectations of a 10-year-old business. Right. And, I think that's, like, a lot of people look at a 1-year-old business and they want it to be able to sprint, and it can't yet. It just can't. It's not developmentally there. And that's natural. Like, you have to go through the ups and downs and the trials and tribulations. So I would say that, with a lot of these macro goals, I recognize like how many little steps add up to that. And before you know it, at least for me, when I started focusing on littler, like much smaller tasks and smaller wins, it almost feels out of nowhere for you. But like, all of a sudden you're just doing bigger and bigger deals and bigger projects are coming your way, because like, time in market, in my opinion, is one of the most important things for yourself as a person, as an entrepreneur, and like for an industry. It's just like, how long have you actually been doing this? And I think people underestimate like doing something for 10 years a lot. Like, that is the way you're gonna achieve those things. But you just have to like buckle down and enjoy the process of what you're doing. And if you really hate it, if you're like, this sucks, I don't want to do this, then you got to just make a pivot quickly. Bail. You got to be like, if you've really seen it through and you're like, I saw this through, this is not for me, then, you can make a shift.
Yeah. What's that quote? We overestimate what we can do one day, but we underestimate what we can do in a year. It's like, it's the same thing. But also too, I think a really important question that I ask myself, or I will pose to other people to see, like, are they actually doing the thing that they think they should be doing, is, if money was never an issue, would you still be doing what you're doing today?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's just a true indicator of, like, you're on the right path or you're not. And now it's time to, like, start being aware to, like, there needs to be some type of shift, because if money's not an issue anymore and you don't want to do that thing, is that really your passion? Is that really your purpose, your end all be all?
Yeah, sure. I sometimes find that to be an overwhelming question, because it's like, it's almost so surreal,
Totally.
But I was having a conversation this weekend around, like, if you had 3 months where you were free, like you didn't have any responsibilities and everything was going to be okay. When you came back, everything was fine. You wouldn't lose any opportunities. Like, everything was fine. What would you do for those 3 months?
I would travel. I know that, because I do not have enough experience traveling, and I know that's just going to change my perspective. So I would just cut off all, like, ties of, like, having to feel that that pressure of a content creator got to put out weekly content. I would just go 3 months off the grid and go learn and explore and come back with a completely fresh perspective.
So isn't it interesting to think about the concept that, like, traveling, like, what's required to travel is not that much. It's prioritizing travel.
You're
right? Do you know how many friends I have who have traveled the world? Like, I have one of my best friends spent his 20s solo traveling through Europe, through, all kinds of different places. He would buy a one-way ticket, and whenever he ran out of money, he would come back. Then he would work for a little bit, and then he would buy a one-way ticket.
Wow.
And he prioritized travel in a way that was so unfathomable to me. Like, I in my 20s, I was like, how can I do that? I'm going to work now and then I'll travel. And then the travel never happened for me. And my answer is the exact same. But what's interesting to me is that if that's important, right? That question reveals what's important to you. And if that's important, you actually could prioritize that. And if you solo travel for a month, let's say 3 months is aggressive. Let's say you did it for a month. Would your content actually potentially have a fresh perspective on it? Would you have a more defined audience? Would you find more, in that month than you would here? So I think there's that question to me. Like, I think over the course of 10 years of entrepreneurship, I don't think I have any answers. I've just developed a better set of questions. And that is a question for me that I look at myself and I'm like, I think I would go to Italy. And it's like, well, dude, why don't you just figure out how to go to Italy? Like, you could do that. You could plan. Yeah. I could batch produce 4 episodes of the show with Colin and say, hey, I'm going to go for a month. Right. Yeah, it's like actually not that.
It's not that. It's definitely doable, but it's nerve-wracking.
It's not that hard to do. Yeah. It's not that hard to do. But we stop ourselves from doing it. And I've been trying to, like, understand that blockage a lot more, that, like, permission that you mentioned at the beginning of the show. Like, how come I can't give myself permission to do that? And that's something that I have a lot of anxiety as an entrepreneur of, like, I'm growing something right now. I have a lot of momentum. If I leave, I'll lose all of the momentum. I'll lose it all.
It's a catch-22 because you have the balls rolling, right? Like, things are going in the right direction right now. You guys everything is on the up and coming. So it's like, why would we not drop everything and stop, but, like, why would I not go faster now? But then it's a double-edged sword, because it's like, is that just going to be the mindset every time we keep hitting these mountains and these peaks? Is like,
totally
more responsibility, more growth, more.
It will
content,
be. Of course,
boom,
it will
boom,
be.
Boom, boom,
Of course, it will be. The more success we have, the more of the thing that we're successful at, we're going to do. Like, that's the reality. And I think another lesson I learned in my early 20s was, like, don't get good at something you don't want to do. Because a lot of people they'll find the thing that makes them money, and they'll be like, all right, I just got to do this for a little bit until, I can do the next thing. But when I first graduated UC Santa Cruz, just to go back in time, my first job was here in Hollywood as a assistant editor. And, to be honest, I originally didn't turn to YouTube because I thought YouTube was just cat videos and a weird place to upload content. And so I worked in Hollywood. I was like, Hollywood's real. That's like a real place. And I was an assistant editor, and I would show up to the studio. It was at Red Studios in Hollywood, and I would dress like as best as I could possibly dress. Cause I thought like when I was walking to the editing department, there would be a producer who saw me and was like, there he is. There's the guy. That's the guy. We need him in the movie. Yeah. I always thought that. I actually thought that was going to happen. Like, I actually thought that. So I would walk, really slow, and then I would get in there, and it was like a pitch black room, and all the other editors were wearing like sweatpants and like comfortable clothes because we were going to be sitting in this editing bay for 10 hours. Yeah. And my job was to pull the dailies and just sync sound. So basically just make sure that when they clap the clapper thing, that it was lined up and I could pass it to the next guy. And I really didn't like it. The editor was amazing, incredible guy. He's actually won 2 Academy Awards, like just an amazing guy. And he had the foresight to take me out to lunch, and he was looking at what I was doing, and he was like, you seem a little frustrated, And I was like, yeah, I am. And he was like, what do you want to do? And I was like, I want to make stuff. Like, I feel like I can come up with an idea today, shoot it, edit it, and put it out tomorrow. And this takes so long. And there's like, I don't have a creative job here, and I don't really know what's going on. And he was like, do you think that doing this will lead you to becoming a producer? And I was like, yeah, it's a foot in the door. And he was like,
yeah, it's part of the process, right? Almost.
Yeah. And he was like, that's wrong. Basically, he was like, what you're doing right now is you're an assistant editor, and you're fine. You're good at it. You're nice to be around. So my next movie, I'll hire you as an assistant editor, and then I'll hire you as an assistant editor again. And then maybe I'll recommend you as an assistant editor. And then one day, 10 years from now, you could be an editor. Wow. And he was like, but what you're describing is not that. And he was like, you have every opportunity in the world to go do that thing. Do exactly what you want to do. Because once you get good at that, then you'll make a career out of doing that thing you want to do, which is produce. You want to make stuff. So he was like, I'd recommend you just go, you find a way to do that thing that you want to do. If that is working at a restaurant and then producing stuff until it hits, do that. If you can immediately find a way to do it, that's financially viable, do that. But just don't do this. Wow. And I was like, it was some of the best advice I've ever gotten in my life. And he was right. And that's why I turned to YouTube, was because it was the only place I could figure out where I didn't need permission to upload a video. I could just do it. I could just make what I wanted to make, and no one would say approve, disapprove. I could just upload it, and then I could find an audience. And if the audience liked it, they would tell me. If the audience didn't like it, no one would watch it. So it was a very clean relationship. And I felt like that, for a guy who didn't really like school, who didn't like having to ask or do things a certain way, that was a space for me where I was like, I want to get good at doing this. Wow. Because this is just me.
What a piece of advice. It's similar, like reverse engineering. Like, if you keep doing this is where you're going to be 10 years from now. Yeah. And it's not going to allow you to put you in that position of like what you really want to do, which is clearly produce. Yeah. The whole press publish, which is like, I love that branding. And it clearly, like, it's so important for creators, right? I know the first drop, it was a reminder to get your ideas out there into the world. Yeah. You never know what could happen. But even for somebody that's not necessarily a creator that hears us today, how can they translate this mindset of pressing publish to anything that they want to do within their own lives?
So I'd say there's 2 words that have been like the most powerful words in my life. And that's what if. And on the other side of what if is press publish. And so you think about like a lot of the thoughts you have, during the day, a lot of them start with what if. And, for me, one of the most important thoughts I ever had was, what if there was an online network dedicated to lacrosse? And what if I created it? And the only thing on the other side of that, for me to feel like comfortable, at least the person I am, like I have this compulsion when I have an idea like that. Like you would be shocked at the amount of things I've put into the world that have gotten no legs, right? Just because I have to put them out. I just don't have a choice. If I have an idea, it's like, if I don't do it, then that is, again, that's where it's like, I have to see that through. And I think sometimes, today I'll tell you some of my advice to people who are like me in a second, but I am someone who thinks what if 3 times, 4 times a day, and then can't really sleep unless I at least explore it. So, the concept of what if, I think, is something that binds all of us who are creative. We're all creative. I mean, for you, what if I had a podcast?
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's a thought for you also that's come across. What if podcasting was just my full-time thing? Right?
Yeah.
And you're seeing it through right now. This moment right now is you exploring that what if.
Yeah.
And you're going to find ways to explore that even more. You're going to, like, if that's a true desire, you're going to spend a lot of time exploring that what if. And what you're doing to explore that what if is pressing publish. You're publishing these episodes. You're coming up with ideas, you're bringing them to life, and without much hesitation, you're pressing publish, because you can now, because the internet has allowed you to, if you have that idea, if you have that what if, and as long as you have an internet connection, you can figure out how to get the idea out there.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have an internet connection, and there's a lot of ways to get an internet connection if you don't have one right now. So I think that's where the term press publish has been the most powerful term, because it's on the other side of what if. And it allows you to bring your idea to life, which to me is the thing that I want to do for the rest of my life. I want to sit in a room with people. I want to come up with ideas, and I want to bring them to life together. And then I want to have those be received by others, and have, back to that identities and emotions, have it evoke an emotion out of them. If I could do that for the rest of my life, that's happiness for me. Like that's exactly what I want. And so, creating a brand called Press Publish, I think, similar to the hat I'm wearing right now, which obviously you can't see because it's an audio episode, but it says Seek Discomfort. And that's, from our friends at Yes Theory. And, wearing a hat like this, I would say, number one, it is obviously a reminder for yourself, but number two, it's something that binds you. I was on the Yes Theory podcast, and 3 weeks ago I was in Ojai, and I was picking up a cup of coffee, and I noticed the barista was wearing a Seek Discomfort sweatshirt. So I was going to say something. And she handed me my coffee. And then at the same time of handing me my coffee, she said, "My parents are immigrants too."
Wow.
And I was like, wow. I was like kind of taken aback. And then she was like, "I loved your episode." And I was like, "Thank you so much." And we immediately had something to talk about. And I think it's the same thing, like having something written on your chest that says Press Publish. It's like, hey, I'm like that too. This is how we build people like us. Like, these are people like us. We all believe in pressing publish. We all believe in getting your ideas out there. We're all these dreamers who have to like publish our ideas, put them into the world to figure them out and figure ourselves out and try and connect with others. So I believe that I'm a part of that community, and I want to find more people like that. And I want to have, ways to identify those people, ways to feel a part of a community like that. And I think apparel is a great way to do that. As we look to the future, we're looking at a lot of different types of products. We're looking at journals, guided journals that will help you explore your creativity, help you press publish, brainstorming cards that will help you think. Like a lot of this stuff, you need a little bit of, guidance, a little bit of push, a little bit of constraints to help you hone in on your creativity. So that's our goal.
And the thing is, this is all going back to kind of where we started in the beginning of the conversation is, your audience and what you're trying to create, which then this aligns with the messaging and the branding of like helping creators.
Mm-hmm.
Where does this inner passion for both you and Colin come from to want to help creators? Why them specifically?
So when we were 21, I started the Lacrosse Network, and that's how I met Colin. He was making content about lacrosse, and there was no roadmap to how to be a YouTube creator, how to do this, how to do this thing that we were talking about of build a career online. And it was very, it was incredibly hard to make money. We didn't make money from the channel really until we sold the business.
Wow.
We made money in different ways. We made websites for people. We made stickers for people. And as a frame of reference, everyone who worked at the company, so it was me, Colin, and then we had a third co-founder, Julian, who everyone was making hundreds of dollars, just as a frame of reference. And when we had projects, like, it was hard. It was hard to do, and we did it for 2 years. And we even got to the point where I was trying to raise money for it. And I, had this call set up with an investor, and I was really excited to tell this story. I was practicing my elevator pitch, and I was like, this is so innovative what I'm doing. I'm making a modern day sports network. Like, how could you not want to be involved in this? And the guy played lacrosse. So I already knew he had, some interest, worked at ESPN. So I was like, wow, this guy gets it. Now he's a venture capitalist. Like, how could you, this is the guy, this is the guy, jackpot. So I get on the phone with him, and like 45 seconds in, I'm doing my elevator pitch, and I use the term broadcast because at the time we were doing live games, and I was like, we're broadcasting live games. We're doing this. And he was like, hold on. So he was like, I worked at ESPN. I did broadcast. I took a look at your link that you sent me. What you're doing is not broadcast. What you're doing is making home movies. And to be honest, you're not that good at it. So I would recommend you keep this as a hobby, but you find something else to do.
It's pretty aggressive.
And I remember, like, my jaw kind of dropped because I did not anticipate that at all. Like, I was such a stubborn optimist again that I was like, this is, come on, you gotta get on board with this. And I just said, okay, like, I just like took a second, and I was like, well, I appreciate you taking the time to look at it, and thank you very much. Hung up the phone. And I remember I was in our space. We had a warehouse space in downtown, and I was like, sat there for a second. I went into the room, and the guys were working and just like editing videos, talking to the community. And I was like, that this does mean that we're pretty innovative. If this guy doesn't get it, like, something's here. And the thing that kept us going was that the audience cared about it. The audience cared about it. The community cared about it. They were diehard. They were passionate. But how to make it a business was really hard. And there was no place to turn. I couldn't turn to anyone. I called so many people for mentorship, and like barely anyone could give me guidance, or wanted to give me guidance on what this was. So when I look at the career we've had 10 years later, there's a lot of ups and downs, but I'm so fulfilled. Like, this is exactly what I want to be doing. And it's not just about making YouTube videos. Like, if you're a musician and you want to make music, or if you're a podcaster and you want to be, you want to be a creator, we are making the content that we wish we had 10 years ago.
Amazing.
And that's what we were doing at 21 years old with the Lacrosse Network. We were making the content we wish we had 10 years prior. We wish we had an online destination for the sport of lacrosse. So at the core of all of this is back to that, who's the audience? Like, the audience for our channel is my 21-year-old self. It's who I was. And that's why I'm so passionate about it. And when I see someone who's like me, who has this what if in their head, what if I could become a musician? What if I could become a YouTuber? What if I could make a short film? Then my goal is to have them feel empowered, to feel educated, and to feel engaged enough within a community to have the support to go do it. And that's the goal, man. Like, it's for the younger version of myself.
That's so beautiful, because when you're doing it for a reason like that, where it's extremely genuine, and it's for it's like you going back to like that younger version of yourself, that is always going to be a feeling that you're going to be able to feel for the rest of your life. Like, there's never going to be a moment where you don't remember what that felt like. And I think that just allows you to continuously want to keep adding fuel to the fire for that version of yourself, because that's literally why I create today. Cause I'm still creating content that I wish I had at 22, so that I could give myself that permission to leave a business school and then go out and actually do the things I want to do. But so I think it's so important when not only, when you're doing like the asking the why of what you're doing, but when you're able to connect it to something that's so personal to you, there's literally, you're going to have your highs and lows. You're going to have those speed bumps along the way, but you're never not going to be able to find the momentum to get back going, because you just remind yourself of what it felt like not that long. A decade ago, but you could probably
Yeah.
still feel that feeling.
Though a decade in entrepreneurship is just not that long.
Yeah,
Like
it's a blink of an eye.
it's a blink of an eye, and it's just not that long. And like, what Colin and I say to each other all the time now is like, it's crazy, but like we consider ourselves having just punched our ticket to get into the race.
Wow.
Like we took all this, it took 10 years to just be able to line up next to other people and be in the race, compete with others in this space, compete for dollars in this space, compete for attention in this space. Like we've just been afforded the opportunity to get in. Colin likes to, I say race. He calls it the NBA. Like we're rookies in the NBA and we're on the bench. And it took us 10 years to get here. And you think about like someone who's trying to make it into the NBA, like that takes a lot longer than 10 years. So, that's how we feel, is like, we're actually, we get to be full-time creators. We do exactly the show we want to make. And that is our income. That's our sole income. That's how we make a living. That to us is the NBA, right? That's like, you are doing exactly what you want. You're getting paid to do it. That's crazy, but it's our first year. It's been 10 years of, all over the place to get here, of like in the same lane. We're still playing basketball, but we're all over the place, just trying to figure out how to do it. And here's year one. So it's crazy that like 10 years feels like a long time. It sounds like a long time. A decade sounds like a long time, but it's actually a lot of times, what it takes to just start.
Yeah. You guys are in that mindset of it's always a work in progress. If 10 years in, but it feels like year one right now, which is like the best mindset to have.
Totally, man. I mean, Colin and I both just started, we watched some of our videos from last year and we were like,
just from last year.
And we're like, they're so bad. And, we're so happy. We're so happy that we don't like them. Yeah. Cause we're like, wow, that means we changed. We did something. We grew.
Yeah. How do you personally balance, like work? And I think on the Ground Up show, I think you had talked about how, I think Colin was like, he sometimes is a night person, a night owl. And I'm sure a lot's changed since that podcast, but how do you guys balance, especially where you guys work hand together? Like, are you Monday through Friday, these are our office hours? Is it just like every day we wake up and what's today's problem? Saturday, Sunday doesn't matter.
I don't know if a lot of people know this, but we have 10 people on our team. And right now,
I knew, I mean, at the level of what you guys produce, I know this. It's not just you two anymore. So I knew that.
It's not
10 people though.
Yeah. There's 10 people on our team, but that's not everyone's full time and not everyone's in our office. There's now 6 people in the LA office. So, we operate just like any other company. We show up to work 5 days a week. We're here, morning to night. Typically everyone gets in between 9:30 and 10 and we're here until 6, sometimes 7. So it's really different now. Balancing, I think is really interesting because it's not just balancing, my work with my personal life. It's a lot more of like balancing my creativity with my leadership and management. That's hard. Like when you're building a company, you want to be, you're a leader and you're a manager and you're someone who's, working with other people and inspiring them to get the right work done and helping them grow to whoever they want to become. And at the same time, you're a creative yourself and you have to find the space where you have your creativity and you have your own inspiration. And that's hard. And I would say, that's the biggest challenge. I find myself, enjoying my time early morning at a coffee shop, with a pen and paper. That's where I find my best creativity, but I would say it's really hard. That's the hardest part because we've grown from, this time last year, it was Colin, myself, and an editor. And now, 12 months later, there's 10 people. So it's a lot. It's a lot that's going on. We have a ton of projects. We have a ton of advertisers, a ton of clients. And in a business that's centered around, Colin and Samir, we're needed in almost every aspect of it. So we're trying to build, with merchandise, with the whole Publish brand, with the newsletter, the Publish Press, with what we're doing for stuff to be more brand led. That's where we're trying to scale, but it's still, this version of Colin and Samir is 1 year old. And so that, again, you come back to being like, okay, this has worked now. This version of Colin and Samir has worked. And that means we're a 1 year old company. So you can't leave it alone. It can't survive on its own. You have to be a part of every facet of its life.
You've been working alongside Colin for 10 plus years. How has he made you a better person?
Colin is the most talented creative I've ever come across. He's the best storyteller I've ever come across. And he's someone who helps me move at a pace that is the way to get not only the best work, but like the right quality of life that I think I also want. Again, I'm a dreamer. I will say what if every day, multiple times a day. And if no one is sitting next to me to help me get focused, I will see all of them through. I'll try and make all of them happen. And that is who I am. Like I am just that person. Like I'll have a thought and I'll be like, I have to try that. But that makes it very challenging to build depth and to build something. He has incredible patience. He's able to, hold out and make sure that we're just chipping away, slowly at something. And I would say that a lot of where we are today is because of that patience. Because both the combination of him and myself is where I think we've both found a lot of success. Where I'm willing to, go pretty aggressive into something. And as Amar from Yes Theory says, I'm willing to throw a backpack over the fence, right? So it's like we have no choice but to go and go over the fence now. Like we have to make that happen. And I did that at the Lacrosse Network as well. Like with live streaming, I signed a deal with the National Lacrosse League to live stream all of their games on our YouTube channel. And I remember coming back into the office and being like, hey guys, we got to figure out how to live stream.
Locked in the deal. Then now we have to figure out how we're going to do this.
Yeah. How we're going to do this in 4 or 5 games a weekend on our channel. And it was a huge deal, but like when you have people who care and are as ambitious and willing to just solve problems, without any ego, like you'll make it happen. And that is Colin, right? Like he is, he's exactly that person. So he grounds me quite a bit. Working with someone for 10 years is not an easy thing to do. It's rooted in, mutual respect, love, communication, patience, and a shared vision for how we see the world. And so I would say like I'm a more focused individual. I'm a more patient individual, and I'm a more creative person because of Colin.
You can see it, especially I mean, I love listening to audio podcasts, but I really love YouTube content because obviously you can see emotion in people, and just watching the content of you two go back and forth. It is like, you could just see you guys are in your element. Like, and obviously this is years in the making of you guys working together as creators. And like, we're seeing the end product of so much blood, sweat, and tears, but it's very clear that it's a genuine relationship, and you guys just like go perfect together. It's literally
appreciate
priceless.
That.
It's really good. Yeah. You mentioned Amar, and obviously we talked about discomfort on the hat. I know you've worked quite a bit with the Yes Theory team with, I'm sure it was, I think the first thing might've been the Wim Hof doc. I think you were a part of that, some of the editing of that. And I'm sure there's been other projects, but having worked with the Yes Theory team, how has there been any big takeaways or lessons working alongside them over the years?
Yeah, man. Like just coming back to that concept of what if, those guys throw what ifs out that you could never imagine, right? That you think are completely impossible, that you would never even allow yourself to think. And they'll think them, and then they'll see them through. So, that to me has been one of the most amazing things. I think they've fostered a community better than I think most people have been able to, and it's just rooted in their authenticity. I will say that one thing that kind of surprised me, and I don't know why, I think it's just growing up in LA and knowing Hollywood and everything, was I was shocked to spend time with them and be like, whoa, they are really these dudes. Like when the cameras are off, they're like, hey, let's go jump in this ice water. Hey, let's go, let's throw our phones into this Ziploc bag for the whole day and just connect. Hey, and I'm like, wow, the cameras are off. These are really these guys. Hey, let's go travel to this place solo. Hey, let's go find some strangers and throw a party tonight. Like they are their most, authentic selves. And there's something I read last week, which I really believe to be true on about YouTube specifically and online content, which is people don't want the authentic you, they want the consistent you. And that mainly has to do with audiences, but I would say that they've done a really good job of over time just remaining the authentic versions of themselves. So yeah, and that's not an easy thing to do when you have to build a brand. A brand is rooted in consistency, right? But they do a really good job of being exactly who they are, being willing to be authentic, and that's why they've built such a big community.
Yeah, they are to me the North Star for content creator of just like even just my own personal path of like the impact I want to be able to have on people's lives. Like those guys have done it at such a high level, and just the utmost respect for everything they've done. And it's cool. I even came across the original video of how you met them, which was like you and Colin made that video of just like shooting an email and like just seeing the first interaction of you meeting Matt and Thomas. It was like, wow, I was like, I had like goosebumps because I was like, little did they all know in this moment in time, like this would go on to be like such a impactful and genuine relationship. So it all goes back to the what if you guys didn't go and push to make that video. It's just.
Well, for us, we, at that point, that's an interesting point in our story because we had just left our jobs. Our company had been acquired. We were working with this company for 3 years and, had really stable salaries and with almost no plan. I mean, actually with no plan, we just jumped out and we're like, I mean, the honest thing was like, we had seen Casey Neistat vlogging and we were like, that's so cool that guy's he's just Casey Neistat. Like that's it. And, we were like hosts on our own network. And we were like, what if we were just Colin and Samir? Like, what if we were just who we are? And then tried that. And that was unbelievably naive of us to think that we could do that and like have success immediately. It was unbelievably naive. I mean, it's only now, we left in 2016 and it's only now that we're able to support ourselves being Colin and Samir. So it's, 5 years later and here we are. But when we took that jump, a lot of it was just like, we would watch a creator and we'd be like, well, what if we could meet them? What if we could chat with them? That would be super cool. And let's use our skill set that we have, which is video. Let's define an audience of one. The audience for that video was Matt, Amar, and Thomas. That was it. That was the audience, right? It was one group of people. It's 3 people. A lot of people sometimes I think when they're creating something, they're like, I need to make something that 1 million people are going to watch. But before that, like who's that person that you want to watch?
Yeah.
And so, back to identities and emotions, it's like we want the guys at Yes Theory to feel connected enough and safe enough and interested enough to meet us. That's it. Very simple outcome. And funny enough, like when we reached out to them, through like in the video, it shows the different ways we reached out to them. And they were like, I remember reading one of their DMs and it was so clear. They were like, they didn't want an experience like a fan experience at all. They were like, hey, you guys can come by the house, but like we have like 5 minutes or so because we need to leave. And I was like, okay, I got it. Like, I get it. You don't want this to be weird. So
totally,
we showed up, said what's up, but yeah, we connected immediately. It was just like, boom, we knew it. We had a shared, vision of the world. We had a shared passion for storytelling. And from, the rest is history. We got to work on some of the coolest projects ever with them and experience some amazing things together.
Yeah, it's so cool, man. It's seeing a lot. I know you helped out, I think, with the Will Smith piece too. Like just seeing how that relationship had grown into something so beautiful. But to know it was that what if of like, what if we reached out to him? What if we had just started Colin Samir? And that's so clear. The 2 words of this podcast episode after people are listening is going to be what if. And it's so funny because I literally just posted a TikTok today. Shoot your shot. Very similarly, like that's my whole mindset. Like shoot your shot with ideas, with dating, with friendships, business ideas, cold emails. It's just like you just got to go for it because you don't know.
And I think also just like learn from it. Like again, like there's no failures. It's just lessons. It's just like accumulating things of like, oh, okay, that didn't work. Yeah, interesting.
Okay, how do we pivot?
What do I know about this process now that I know that doesn't work? That's like really helpful to know. So Yeah, I would say that's like shoot your shot, just do it. Like whatever gets you going. Don't leave ideas idle in your head like that. That's like one of the most uncomfortable things in the world, is to have an idea like kicking around in your head.
Yeah.
But I said I was going to give advice to people who are big dreamers and like myself, like the person who says "what if" so many times a day. What I've done and what I think has made us successful this year specifically, is that I've surrounded myself with people who will tell me no. People who I can help identify, here's my goals, here's what I want to do. And then every day I'm like, hey, what if we do this? What if we do that? And we have a head of operations now who just tells me that's not in line with the goals you've told me. So let's table that. Let's like
keep guardrails up.
Keep the guardrails on it. And I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. And now when we focus on one thing and we're able to actually build a brand. And now when you build a foundation of that, like now the what ifs get really crazy because now you actually have this space where people are calling you with what ifs that you were like, oh, that's incredible. I would love to do that. Like that's it's amazing. And that's, I think, like the most exciting part of it. Like now that Colin and I are, we have a show that we feel really good about. We're hosts in the space. We're considered thought leaders and experts in our field. We're getting opportunities to interview people we couldn't have imagined. We're getting opportunities to host shows. We're doing a keynote this week. Like these things that we're getting to do are now here because we focused ourselves.
Yeah. Luck is when opportunity meets preparation. You guys are getting the fruition of everything you deserve to get.
I think the important thing to recognize, and this was from a creator that we interviewed, he said, luck happens to a lot of people. It actually happens to almost everyone. But you have to know when it's there and you have to know what to do with it. And so, I think like preparation, opportunity, understanding it. And some of that comes back to like, how do you know if you're lucky, if you know what you're trying to do? Like if you don't know what enough is, if you don't know what the end goal is, how do you know when luck hits?
Yeah. You have to recognize it and you have to be prepared for it, but then you have to be self-aware enough to go, is this aligned with who I am, what I want to do? And
because the same thing could happen to me that could happen to you, and one of us would consider it lucky and the other one would be like, that's just a thing that happened. So it's subjective.
It's all different subjective and different perspectives for everybody. We're gonna get into the final 5. These are quick 5 questions, 1-sentence answers, very short, simple, and sweet. Question number 1: how can people learn to give themselves permission to follow their interests and ideas?
Have conversations with yourself and find a buddy who is really inspiring to you and can help you give permission to yourself.
Love that. If you could go back and tell yourself one piece of advice at any point in your life, what would it be and when?
Move to New York when I was 25 years old. I had the opportunity to, and I didn't do it. Yeah.
You'll get there at some point.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah. Sunshine's pretty good, right? Mm-hmm. What's an area of your life you need to put more effort into?
Right now, I would say health.
Like fitness,
nutrition. Like it used to be a big focus of mine. It's not a big focus right now. So I'd say health, and then just presence. Like things are so exciting as an entrepreneur. This is way longer than one line. Things are so exciting as an entrepreneur that like, sometimes I'm sitting with my wife having dinner and I'm checking emails or looking at stats, or my mind is in a different place. And I think that's directly connected to health.
Compartmentalizing. That's very hard to do, but it can be really helpful. What's the first step anyone can take to reaching their inner potential?
Write down what you think your inner potential is on a piece of paper.
It's good. Last question. As people wrap up listening to the last 67 minutes of this podcast, what is one challenge you have for the listener today after they've listened to this podcast? One challenge.
My challenge to you is to write every day for the next 30 days. It can be free flowing. It can be structured. It can be a to-do list. But write every day. It's a great way to have a conversation with yourself, and you'll probably reveal to yourself what you actually want.
That's good. Journaling has been a game changer, and actually taking all these fucking crazy ideas in my mind and putting it on a piece of paper. It's good to actually visually see it. And
it's huge,
been a game changer for me. Samir, this has been Honestly, an absolute honor. Watching from afar, as I said before, like you guys do an incredible job at what you do, and as a creator, it only adds more fuel to the fire within me. Like when I saw you a couple weeks ago, I told you I had just came across like the Call Her Daddy one, as somebody that's watching the podcast space and having so much want and desire to. I'm not going to necessarily say try to get to her scale, but just that piece is in every piece I've seen through the Mr. Beast with Yes Theory. I mean, you guys do an incredible job. And I think what is so obvious to me in this episode is your why, which I think just makes me want to see you succeed even more because it's like such a genuine thing. But it's been an absolute honor. And I really do appreciate you taking the time to be on the show today, man.
Appreciate it, man. Conversation is one of my favorite things in the world, and you do it well. So I appreciate you having me on.
I appreciate that, man. Ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoyed this podcast today, little challenge for you. Screenshot this episode on whatever podcast platform you're listening in on. Post your IG story. Tag Samir. He's at, I'm going to spell it out for you guys, at SAMIRCHAUDRY. I'll have it linked up in the description below. Tag me as well at Bobbbaaaay. That's BO, 3 B's, 4 A's and a Y. Share out the podcast on your IG story. Let us know what was the biggest takeaway. What was the learning? How did this episode change your perspective? I guarantee you now have a better grip of what if. So if that was it, throw that in your IG story and let us know how that changed you. And then as well as below, I will have Colin and Samir's content tagged up. You can find them at Colin and Samir on IG, YouTube, and I will have their website linked up below. Is there any other place I should be sending or plugging people to go to?
No, just go to a coffee shop and write. That's it.
Perfect. Samir, thanks for being on the podcast today, brother.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Bearded Man Podcast. See ya.